Hello, Nancy. Thank you for joining us for this short interview. I enjoyed your speech today here at in the Amsterdam at the Executive Digital Exchange, and I have some questions for you. First of all, you're a strategic futurist, which is a beautiful name, and a lot of people may think so. What is your work on a day-to-day basis? How does your week look like, or a year typically, or is it totally unpredictable like the future maybe?
It's very dynamic, right? We talk about the future is fluid, as so is our work. And so we work very fluidly. The way I describe, really, so first, what is a strategic futurist is somebody who thinks a lot about, again, what the future needs and expects, and thinks about how we orient toward it, right? How do we plan and use our resources and our time and our curiosity toward that? So a big part of what I spend a week doing is learning. From other speakers, from things that I read, from some, I have a whole network of people called Pinkers, which are people you need to know, which are people who are literally architecting the future. So I spend a lot of time learning and a lot of time connecting, because I think those are two really important capacities to be able to navigate the future, and then I turn that into various forms of work, whether we're creating an event, whether we're working with a client, or whether we're giving a talk.
Yeah. So that's how you get inspired, by connecting to people and by learning.
But it's not even inspired. I will actually argue that is how I do my work. Like without having, investing time in building those relationships and connecting with people and reading and learning, I can't do my job, right? So as opposed to thinking you have to go do that after, I actually do that as part of my work. And there was a year in which I looked at what I was charging for my time and realized I wasn't including all the learning time, and I doubled all my rates. So I would have time for learning.
Exactly, yeah. And you also said you need to breathe, right? So probably you have to go slow also to be able to go fast.
I do, and I have an amazing work-life balance because I work from home, right? And I travel and I do what I want. So I'm able to control my days and my time in a way that I think is really hard when you work in an office and there's an expectation to be there and sort of show up in a certain way. And so depending on whatever environment you're in, definitely learning coping skills, right? Like how to turn off digital technology sometimes, how to, again, spend time one-on-one with people or out in nature or running or whatever it is. The rise of meditation and mindfulness continues to grow, and there's a reason why.
Yes.
As the world gets more chaotic, right, we have to get calmer on the inside. And so learning what it takes for each of us to figure out how to navigate that better, I think is a big part of our work.
Yes. Typically we don't get trained how to handle all this information, right? So that should be something that should be taught at schools or wherever. What is your thought on that?
Well, I do think that we need to be really good digital guides for, because I call it digital hygiene, right? Teaching kids about how to manage it. Now, I do think that kids probably have a different capacity for learning and using those technologies, and so we always try and impose our old school thinking on their new school way of working and thinking and how fast and facile they are. But I think, again, they're learning and teaching themselves that they get burned out fast, right? Or they get tired, they don't sleep well. So knowing when in which to, how to just looking at all the resources that you have and figuring out how to deploy them more effectively, right? And being good stewards for our kids around that.
So do you think, you talked about the adaptability quotient, right? So is that something that children will have a higher adaptability quotient? And are we losing that when we get older? And how can we, let's say, react on that given the changes that are coming up?
Well, I think as leaders, we were never encouraged to have an adaptability quotient, right? Everyone was sort of put through an education model and through a business training model and a business execution model that was all about efficiency, and learn the guidebook, learn the blueprint, and then just be able to execute it more effectively and more efficiently, more consistently. So this whole idea about having to be adaptive is a new capacity. So I don't think that we've lost it. I think that we're now being invited to learn to do this in a way that we have never been invited to do it before. And I think our education structures need to get better at encouraging that in kids. I don't think it does it very well yet. I always talk about there's 4 things that we need to cultivate in youth, which is curiosity, empathy, agency, and grit. And if you imagine our actual current education system, it burns almost all of that, right? So how do we encourage kids to stay curious? How do we cultivate a sense of agency that they can do something if we're always doing it for them? And how do we teach them perseverance and a sense of empathy? And so I think that kids will get better at it over time if we pay attention to it. What we're seeing right now are high levels of anxiety, right? That was the other thing I talked about, right? Yeah. Depression and anxiety and unfortunately even suicide amongst youth, who I think feel as though the expectations are here and their training is here, right? They're not congruent. And so I do think we need to do a much better job of helping kids prepare.
So what do you think? Will this inequality increase, or will there be an inflection point coming up? Are we accepting this? This difference?
What would shift it? right? So right now, she or he who holds the algorithm will continue to make more money than the person who doesn't, right? If you start to imagine like autonomous vehicles, autonomous trucking, right? Right now, that is money that is being spent across a huge range of people, from truckers to hoteliers to restaurants to gas stations to whatever. When that goes away, right, and it's all owned by the person who owns that algorithm and owns that trucking company, who's going to have the most money? That person. So we are not building systems right now that are designed to be more inclusive or to be equitably distributing this income. So we have to think about what are the solutions to that. I didn't talk about, but one thing people talk a lot about is universal basic income, or at least universal basic mobility, universal basic education, right? Having access to things. If we're actually as a society producing so much and being so successful, how do we ensure that people have access to that? The future of work might look different. Do we really all go to an office and work 40 hours a week in a job that 70% of us hate to be able to say that we're all part of the economy, right? There might be another way of structuring all that. There's a whole other thing about whether or not we will be able to privatize our data and be able to have access to our own data and then be able to sell or exchange value for our data. So the way in which we are currently constructing things is not going to work. And we'll have to figure out what the new systems are that need to be redesigned in order for it to work better.
Yes. And so tomorrow you're speaking here again. So what is the subject for tomorrow?
I'm digging in a little deeper into the income divide portion of it and talking more about how we build capacities for permanent, living in a land, again, of permanent ambiguity, and really diving more deeply into what leadering looks like and how it's different from leadership. So it's taking a bit of what today was and diving deeper and then adding another dimension to it. So really it's future of work meets future of leadership meets future of taking good care of us on the planet.
Yes. Okay. Look forward to that.
Thank you.
And what is your next stop after this? What city? Where are you going?
Well, it's funny. I've been in Europe now for 2 weeks, and so it was like Oslo, London, Amsterdam. I will fly back through LA, do a talk in LA, and then I'll be home for a week. So, and then I've got like 14 cities in 8 weeks.
Okay.
So it's kind of crazy. But then again, I will just say, just for balance of life, January and February I was home the whole time. July and August I will be home the whole time. So I have this wonderful life where I get a chance to kind of like vary it up, which for me is good. So.
I think it's good for everybody. Okay.
Thank
you for joining.
Sure, thank you.